I am Dominique, 32 years old and a senior investment banker. My life is governed by risk assessment and strict control. I spent 10 years clawing my way up from a cramped apartment in Atlanta to a corner office overlooking the skyline. I trade in millions, but I account for every single cent. But last Tuesday, control evaporated in a single vibration of my phone. I was in the middle of a high-stakes Zoom meeting with our partners in London. The deal was worth $40 million, and I was leading the negotiation. My phone was face up on my mahogany desk, on silent mode. Suddenly, the screen lit up with a notification, red and urgent. I glanced down, expecting a market update. Instead, I saw an alert from American Express Centurion. This is the black card, the invite-only card that I had worked my entire career to qualify for. The text read, "Attempted charge, $105,000. Vendor, the Plaza Hotel wedding venue. Status, pending approval. Please confirm." My blood ran cold. The air in my temperature-controlled home office suddenly felt suffocating. $100,000. I stared at the screen, trying to process the numbers. I had not authorized this. My card was in my wallet, or so I thought. Then the realization hit me like a physical blow to the stomach. The spare card. The emergency card I kept in the fireproof safe at my parents' house. My voice was steady, but my hand shook as I clicked the unmute button on my laptop. "Gentlemen, I have a family emergency. We will have to reconvene in 2 hours." My boss looked concerned, but I did not wait for his permission. I slammed the laptop shut. I did not run. I marched. I grabbed the keys to my Porsche Panamera and walked out the door. The only sound in the house was the clicking of my heels on the hardwood floor, a rhythm of pure, unadulterated rage. I was not just a banker anymore. I was a woman whose kindness had just been weaponized against her. I tore out of my driveway and onto the highway, weaving through the heavy Atlanta traffic. My hands gripped the leather steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I dialed my mother, Wanda, straight to voicemail. I dialed my father, Otis, straight to voicemail. Of course they were not answering. They knew exactly what they were doing. As I drove, the memory of how they got that card played in my mind like a horror movie. 3 months ago, my mother had sat in my kitchen, tears streaming down her face. She told me Dad's blood pressure medication was getting too expensive, and they were struggling to keep up with the copays. She begged for the PIN code to the spare card I kept in their safe. "Just for medical emergencies, Dom," she had said. "Just so we do not die because we are poor." I had looked at her worn-out hands and felt that familiar pang of guilt, the guilt of making it out when they stayed behind. So I gave her the code. I told her it was for life-or-death situations only. I was such a fool. The emergency was not medical. The emergency was my sister Chantel's ego. Traffic on Peachtree Street was a nightmare. I needed to know exactly where they were. I pulled up Instagram at a red light. My sister Chantel is 26 years old and has never held a job for longer than 3 months, yet she calls herself a lifestyle coach. Her profile loaded, and there it was, a story posted 10 minutes ago. The photo showed Chantel standing on a velvet podium in the most exclusive bridal salon in the city. She was wearing a dress that looked like it cost more than a Honda Civic. In her hand was a crystal flute of champagne. My mother was in the background, beaming with pride, holding the very black card I was looking for. But it was the caption that made me see red. It read, "Thank you, big sis, for funding my dream wedding at the plaza. Best gift ever. #blessed, #rich family." She had not even asked me. She had not sent a text. She simply took a card with a limit higher than most people's annual salary and decided it was hers. She was spending my hard-earned money to impress a man who thought we were trash. I threw the phone onto the passenger seat. The light turned green and I floored the accelerator. The engine roared a sound that matched the scream building in my throat. I was not going to call the bank yet. No, that would be too easy. I wanted to see their faces. I wanted to see the fear in their eyes when the bank walked through the door and announced that it was closed. I pulled up to the bridal salon, screeching into a no parking zone right in front of the glass doors. A valet rushed over to tell me I could not park there, but one look at my face made him stop. I stepped out of the car, adjusting my blazer. I did not look like a sister coming to celebrate. I looked like an auditor coming to foreclose. I pushed open the heavy glass doors, and the smell of expensive lilies and arrogance hit me. I heard them before I saw them. My mother's loud laughter echoed off the marble walls. I walked past the receptionist who tried to ask for my appointment. I stormed toward the VIP suite in the back. The curtains were drawn back, and there they were. A perfect picture of a happy family. Chantel was twirling in the dress. My father was looking at a tuxedo on a rack. My mother was signing a receipt the sales associate held out on a leather clipboard. I did not hesitate. I did not pause for dramatic effect. I walked straight up to my mother and snatched the black metal card from her hand. The room went silent. The sales associate gasped. My mother looked at her empty hand, then up at me, blinking in confusion. "Dom, what are you doing here?" my mother asked, her voice trembling slightly but trying to maintain composure. "We were just about to FaceTime you to show you the dress." I looked at the receipt. It was not just for the venue deposit. It was for the dress, the flowers, and a catering down payment. The total was now $105,000. I looked at Chantel. She stopped twirling. Her smile faltered, but she did not look ashamed. She looked annoyed. "You are ruining the vibe," Dom Chantel said, rolling her eyes. "Put the card back. The transaction is not cleared yet, and the lady is waiting." I looked at the sales associate. "Cancel it," I said. My voice was low. Dangerous. "Excuse me?" the associate stammered, looking between my mother and me. "I said cancel the transaction," I repeated louder this time. "This card is stolen, and if you process this charge, I will sue this entire establishment for aiding and abetting fraud." My father stepped forward, his chest puffed out. "Now you listen here, Dominique. You will not embarrass us in front of these white people. Give your mother the card. This is your sister's wedding. Family helps family." "Family helps family," I repeated, letting out a cold, dry laugh. "Is that what this is, Dad? Helping?" Because from where I am standing, it looks like theft. You stole my card. You forged my signature, and you spent 6 figures on a party when you do not even own your own home. Tyler, the groom, stepped out of the changing room. He is a tall man from old money in Connecticut, the kind of family that quietly judges everything we do. He adjusted his silk tie and looked at me with a mixture of pity and disgust. "Dominique," he said, his voice smooth and condescending. "If you are having cash flow problems, my father could arrange a small loan for you. There is no need to make a scene. It looks very ghetto." The word hung in the air. Ghetto. My parents did not defend me. Chantel did not defend me. My mother actually nodded, agreeing with him. "Shush, Dom," my mother whispered. "Tyler is right. Stop acting like you are poor. You have plenty of money. Just let your sister have this. You are being ungrateful." Ungrateful. I looked at the 3 people I had supported for a decade. The tuition I paid, the medical bills, the bail money, the house renovations. And now, standing here being called ungrateful and ghetto by the people who were spending my money. Something inside me snapped. It was not a loud snap. It was the quiet click of a vault door locking shut forever. I looked at Tyler, then at my family. "You are right, Tyler," I said, smoothing my blazer. "I should not make a scene." I turned to the sales associate who was holding the receipt with trembling hands. I took the receipt from her and ripped it into tiny pieces, letting them fall onto the pristine white floor like confetti. Then I took out my phone and held it up. "I am not declining the charge," I said to the room. "I am reporting it as criminal activity." I tapped the screen. The Amex app flashed. "Card frozen. Fraud reported." Chantel's face went pale. "Mom, what did she do?" Chantel screamed. "The payment terminal just beeped, 'Error.'" I turned around and walked toward the door. Behind me, I heard my mother screaming my name and my father shouting that I was dead to them. But I did not look back. As I stepped out into the hot Atlanta sun, I felt lighter than I had in years. They wanted a show. I was about to give them a whole production. And the ticket price was going to be everything they owned. The bridal salon was called L'Amour, and it sat on the most expensive corner of Buckhead. Even from the sidewalk, I could smell the sickeningly sweet scent of fresh peonies and expensive perfume. It was a place designed to sell fantasies, but I was walking in with a sledgehammer of reality. I pushed through the heavy glass double doors. The air conditioning hit me first, followed by the soft classical music that was meant to soothe nervous brides. A receptionist with a headset and a judgmental stare looked up from her marble desk. She saw my windblown hair and my lack of a wedding ring. She saw a woman who did not belong in this sanctuary of white lace. "Excuse me, ma'am." She started rising from her seat, her voice dripping with polite condescension. "You cannot just barge in here. Appointments are private, and we have high-profile clients today." I did not even slow down. I did not look at her name tag. I fixed her with the stare that I usually reserved for underperforming junior analysts on Wall Street. "I am not a customer," I said, my voice low and lethal. "I am the bank, and I am here to close an account." She froze. She sat back down. Power recognizes power, even when it is vibrating with rage. The security guard near the door took a step forward, but the receptionist shook her head slightly, signaling him to stand down. She sensed that stopping me would cause a scene far worse than letting me pass. I marched down the hallway, my heels sinking into the plush cream carpet. I could hear laughter drifting from the platinum suite at the end of the corridor. It was a familiar laugh. It was the sound of my mother holding court. It was the sound of my sister getting exactly what she wanted without lifting a finger. It was the sound of my money being set on fire. Every step I took felt heavier, fueled by a decade of silent resentment. I reached the velvet curtains that separated the suite from the hallway. I ripped them open with enough force to rattle the brass rings. The scene before me was a masterpiece of selfishness. My sister Chantel was standing on a circular podium, bathed in soft golden light. She was wearing a custom Galia Lahav gown that hugged her curves and flared out in a dramatic train of silk and crystals. It was breathtaking. It was stunning. It was also $20,000. My mother, Wanda, was lounging on a chaise lounge like she was the Queen of Sheba. She was wearing a designer dress that I knew for a fact I had paid for last Christmas. She held a crystal flute of champagne in one hand and my black American Express Centurion card in the other, waving it around like a conductor's baton. Two bridesmaids were giggling in the corner, taking boomerangs for Instagram. They were toasting. "To the bride," my mother announced, raising her glass high, her voice thick with unearned pride. "To the most beautiful wedding Atlanta has ever seen, and to living the life we deserve." They looked so happy, so unbothered. They were drinking vintage champagne paid for with my labor, celebrating a future built on my credit score. For a split second, I felt a physical pain in my chest. It was the heartbreak of realizing that to them, I was not a daughter or a sister. I was just a resource. I was a gold mine they were strip mining until nothing was left but a hollow shell. Chantel spun around, laughing, the light catching the diamonds on her bodice. Then she saw me standing in the doorway, breathing hard. Her smile did not drop. It just curled into something uglier, something entitled. "Oh, look, Mom," she chirped without an ounce of fear. "The wallet finally arrived." "Take the dress off," I said. My voice was not a scream yet, but it vibrated with a frequency that shattered the celebratory mood in the room instantly. "Take it off, right now, and give me my card." Chantel stopped posing. Her hands dropped from her waist, and she looked at me with an expression that was less fearful and more annoyed, like I was a fly buzzing around her wedding cake. She let out a dramatic sigh that echoed in the silent suite. "Dom, seriously," she groaned. "You are being so dramatic. Can we not do this right now? I am in the middle of a fitting." I took a step forward, my heels clicking ominously on the marble floor. "I am not asking you, Chantel. You are wearing stolen property. You have exactly 30 seconds to step out of that gown before I rip it off you myself." That was when my mother moved. For a woman in her 60s, she moved with the speed of a linebacker. Wanda intercepted me before I could reach the podium, her fingers digging into my bicep with a painful iron grip. She did not look sorry. She did not look guilty. She looked furious. She dragged me forcibly toward a corner of the room, behind a large display of veils shielding us from the view of the wide-eyed sales assistants. "Are you insane?" she hissed, her face inches from mine. Her eyes were wide, not with panic, but with the intensity of keeping up appearances. "Lower your voice, Dominique. Tyler is in the men's lounge getting fitted for his tuxedo. His parents are meeting us for lunch in 20 minutes. Do you want them to hear you acting like a lunatic? Do you want to ruin this marriage before it even starts?" I yanked my arm out of her grip. "Acting like a lunatic," I repeated, my voice rising despite her warnings. "Mom, you stole $100,000 from me. You broke into my safe. You committed a felony. And you are worried about me being loud." Wanda rolled her eyes, as if I were a toddler complaining about a scraped knee. "Oh, stop using words like felony," she spat. "It is family money, Dominique. You are sitting on millions in that investment account of yours. We needed the deposit to secure the date. You know how competitive the plaza is. What was I supposed to do? Let your sister get married in a community center because you were too busy working to answer your phone?" I stared at her. The air in the room felt suddenly thin. It was not the theft that hurt the most. It was the entitlement. It was the absolute lack of remorse. She truly believed that my money was community property. She believed that, because I had made it out of our neighborhood and built wealth, I owed them everything. I was not a person to her. I was a resource. I was a walking checkbook. $100,000 is a drop in the bucket for you, she continued, smoothing down the front of her designer dress. "Do not be stingy. This is your sister's big day. Think about the family image. Tyler comes from old money. We need to show them that the Carters belong in their world. We need to look the part. So you are using my credit score to build a fake life for Chantel? I said, my voice trembling with rage. You are buying respectability with money you did not earn. I am doing what a mother does, Wanda said coldly, straightening her spine. I am ensuring my child has the best. You should be happy to help. But instead, you are standing here calculating pennies like a stranger. You are so cold, Dominique. Money has made you cold. The gaslighting was masterful. Within 2 minutes, she had flipped the script. I was no longer the victim of grand larceny. I was the cold, ungrateful daughter who cared more about her bank balance than her flesh and blood. Behind her, I saw Chantel sipping champagne again, clearly confident that Mom would handle the situation. The level of disrespect was so profound it made me dizzy. I realized then that they would never stop, unless I forced them to stop. The heavy velvet curtain swept aside again, but this time it was not a sales assistant. It was my father, Otis Carter. He was wearing his Sunday best suit, a charcoal gray 3-piece number that I had bought him for Father's Day last year. But his face was twisted in a snarl I usually only saw when he was arguing about politics or losing money on a scratch-off ticket. He did not look at my mother, who was still clutching my stolen card. He looked straight at me, and his eyes were cold. Is this what I sent you to college for, Dominique? He boomed his voice, shaking the small room. So you could come back here and count pennies against your own flesh and blood? You are acting like a stranger, like a cold-hearted bill collector instead of a sister. I stared at him, stunned. Dad, she stole from me, I managed to say, my voice cracking slightly. That is over $100,000. That is theft. It is family resources, he shouted, stepping between me and my mother, blocking my path. He poked a thick finger toward my chest. I worked double shifts at the plant for 30 years to put food on your table. I sacrificed my back and my knees so you could sit in that air-conditioned office and play with numbers. And now you want to call the police on your mother because she is trying to give your sister a future? You are a soulless merchant, Dominique. A bean counter with no heart. He took a step closer, invading my personal space. Look at where you are standing, girl. This is the big leagues. Chantel is about to marry into the Sterling family. Do you know what that means for us? For your mother? This wedding is not just a party. It is an investment. It is her chance to change her life, to change our lives. Tyler's family has generational wealth, and you want to sabotage the merger over a piece of plastic? The merger? He called his daughter's marriage a merger. I felt sick to my stomach. To him, Chantel was just another asset class, and I was the venture capital required to secure the deal. You are unbelievable, I whispered. You are essentially selling her, and you are using my money to pay the down payment. Watch your mouth, he growled. He did not wait for me to respond. He reached out and grabbed the strap of my bag. It was a Hermes Birkin, a symbol of the success he claimed to despise yet felt entitled to. You need to leave, he barked, tugging hard at the leather strap. Give me your car keys. You are too emotional to drive, and I will not let you ruin this fitting with your hysterics. Go wait in the car like a good girl. I stumbled forward as he yanked the bag, losing my balance in my heels. For a second, we were locked in a grotesque tug-of-war. My father, the man who had taught me how to ride a bike, was now physically wrestling me for my property in a bridal salon. Let go. I gasped, gripping the handles with both hands. Dad let go of my bag. He pulled harder, his face turning red. I said, "Give me the keys, Dominique. Do not make me take them. You are going to go home. You are going to unlock that card, and you are going to apologize to your sister for causing this stress." The physical aggression was the final shatter point. The illusion of the protective father dissolved. I saw him for what he was, a bully who was terrified that his retirement plan was about to walk out the door. I yanked the bag back with a strength born of pure adrenaline, breaking his grip. He stumbled back, straightened his jacket, and looked at me with pure hatred. And that was when I realized there was no fixing this. The bridge wasn't just burned, it had been detonated. The heavy oak door to the groom's lounge creaked open, and silence fell over the room instantly. It was the kind of suffocating silence that usually happens when a judge enters a courtroom. Tyler Sterling stepped out. He looked like he had just stepped off a yacht in Martha's Vineyard. His midnight blue tuxedo was custom-fitted and flawless without a single wrinkle. He adjusted his silk cufflinks with slow, deliberate movements that screamed old money privilege. Then he looked at us. He looked at my father, who was red-faced and panting from our struggle. He looked at my mother, clutching my credit card like a lifeline. And then his cool gray eyes landed on me. I knew exactly what he saw. My hair was messy from where my father had grabbed me. My blazer was askew. I was breathing hard, my chest heaving with indignation. In his eyes, I was not a senior investment banker at a top firm. I was just a problem. He did not ask what was wrong. He did not ask why his future father-in-law was physically manhandling a woman. He just sighed. It was the long, weary sigh of a man dealing with unruly children or bad service. "Dominique," he said, his voice smooth like aged whiskey. He walked over to where I stood, towering over me. I straightened my spine, trying to regain some dignity, but his presence was designed to make everyone else feel small. "I heard there was an issue with the deposit," he continued, looking down his nose at me. "Look, if you are experiencing liquidity issues, if you are short on cash, just say so. My family has a charitable trust for the underprivileged. We can arrange a small personal loan for you to cover your obligations." I felt the blood drain from my face. A charitable trust. He was offering me charity. But it was his next words that stopped my heart and froze the air in my lungs. "Please do not come in here making scenes, Dominique. Screaming over money, fighting with your elders. It looks very ghetto." The word hung in the air like toxic smoke. Ghetto. It was a weapon wrapped in a silk handkerchief. He used it to dismiss my master's degree, my career, my achievements, and my humanity. He used it to put me back in the box he thought I belonged in. I waited. I waited for my father to punch him. I waited for my mother to defend her daughter. I waited for Chantel to say something, anything. But nobody moved. My mother actually nodded. She looked at Tyler with an apologetic smile, desperate to keep his approval. "I am so sorry, Tyler," she said softly, her voice dripping with submission. "You know how Dominique gets. She is very emotional about money. We will handle her." That was the moment. That was the exact second the Dominique Carter they knew died. The sister who forgave everything died standing on that plush carpet. I did not scream. I did not explain that I earned more in a bonus check than Tyler had earned in his entire life. I did not tell him that the luxury car he drove was leased under my name. I looked at Tyler. I looked at the checkbook in his hand. "Keep your money, Tyler," I said. My voice was no longer shaking. It was dead calm. "You are going to need it." I pulled my bag from my father's loosening grip. I smoothed my hair back. I turned my back on the tuxedo, the gown, and the betrayal. As I walked to the door, I felt their eyes on me. They thought I was retreating in shame. They thought they had won. They had no idea that I was not walking away. I was walking to my car to initiate a total financial war. The elevator doors slid open directly into my penthouse foyer with a soft hush that sounded deafening after the chaos of the bridal salon. My apartment was a masterpiece of modern design. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Atlanta skyline, which was just beginning to twinkle in the twilight. The floors were imported Italian marble. The art on the walls was original and insured for more than my parents' house was worth. It was the definition of Black excellence. It was everything I had worked for. And as I stepped inside, dropping my keys on the console table, I had never felt more alone. The silence here was different. It was expensive silence. It was the kind of quiet that you pay a premium for to escape the noise of the world. But tonight, it felt heavy. It felt like a vacuum sucking the air out of my lungs. I kicked off my Louboutins, leaving them where they fell. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water, my hands trembling slightly. Tyler's voice was still echoing in my head. Ghetto. He had looked at me, the woman who managed portfolios worth hundreds of millions, and reduced me to a stereotype because I dared to ask for my own money back. And my family had let him. They had watched him strip away my dignity, and they had nodded in agreement just to keep their access to his world. I walked to the window and pressed my forehead against the cool glass. I looked down at the city. Somewhere down there, my sister was probably still trying on dresses, laughing about how uptight I was. They thought this was over. They thought I would go home, cool off, and pay the bill like I always did. They were banking on my loneliness. They knew that for years I had paid their debts just to feel like I was part of the tribe. Not anymore. I turned away from the view and walked down the long hallway to my master suite. I did not go to the bed. I went straight to the walk-in closet. I pushed aside a row of silk blouses and pressed my hand against the hidden panel in the wall. It slid back, revealing a heavy steel safe. I punched in the code. It was my sister's birthday. A stupid, sentimental choice that I resolved to change immediately. The heavy door swung open with a mechanical click. Inside were stacks of cash, my passport, and a few pieces of jewelry. But I reached for the thick, leather-bound binder at the very bottom. It was heavy. It felt heavier than it should have. I pulled it out and carried it to the center island of my closet, placing it down under the chandelier. The label on the spine read, Family Support, a generic name for a file that documented a decade of financial abuse. I opened the cover. The first page was a spreadsheet I had updated just last month. It was color-coded and categorized. Medical bills, tuition, car notes, bail money, vacations, emergency loans that were never repaid. I ran my finger down the column of totals. The numbers blurred for a second. I had always tracked it out of habit, out of professional diligence, but I had never let myself truly look at the sum. I had treated it like a necessary tax for being the one who made it out. But as I flipped through the receipts staple-gunned to the pages, I saw the truth. Here was the $5,000 for my father's dental work, the same week he told me he was proud of me. Here was the $15,000 for Chantel's car down payment, the same month she actually remembered to call me on my birthday. I realized with a sick, sinking feeling that their love had a price tag. Every kind word, every invitation to dinner, every moment of connection directly correlated to a check clearing. I was not their daughter. I was their sponsor. I slammed the binder shut, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the quiet room. The sadness evaporated. The loneliness hardened into something cold and sharp. I picked up the heavy file. It was time to audit the books, and I was going to make sure the numbers finally balanced, even if it cost them everything. I opened the leather binder, and the smell of old paper mixed with the faint scent of my expensive perfume. It was a strange juxtaposition, just like my life. Success on the outside, rot on the inside. My finger traced the first line item on the spreadsheet. The date was from 7 years ago. $50,000. Wire transfer to the Fulton County court system. I remembered that day. My father had called me at 3 a.m, sobbing. He said my cousin Marcus had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. He said the system was rigged against young black men. He begged me to help. Family protects family, Dominique, he had said. So I paid the bail. I later found out Marcus was arrested for running a chop shop out of my grandmother's garage. He never paid me back. He never even said thank you. He just bought a new chain the week he got out. I turned the page. The numbers got bigger. $200,000. Contractor fees and materials. This was for the renovation of my parents' house. My mother had claimed the foundation was cracking and the roof was leaking. She said it was unsafe. She cried about being afraid the ceiling would collapse on them while they slept. I wrote the check without asking for quotes, because I was a good daughter. I pulled out the stapled receipts attached to the page. They were not for structural repairs. They were for Italian marble countertops, a sub-zero refrigerator, a master bathroom expansion with a jacuzzi tub. They had not fixed the house. They had upgraded it to show off to the neighbors. They had used my concern for their safety to fund their vanity. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, but I angrily wiped it away. I flipped to the section labeled Education. $80,000. Spelman College. This was Chantel's tuition. I remembered how proud I was when she got in. I wanted her to have the HBCU experience I never got because I was too busy working 2 jobs to pay for state school. I paid for everything. Tuition, room and board, books, a meal plan. And what did I get for it? She dropped out sophomore year because she said waking up for 8 a.m. classes was toxic to her mental health. She said she could make more money as an influencer. She took my $80,000 of hard work and flushed it down the drain so she could post fit tea ads on Instagram. I slammed the binder shut. My hand was stinging from how hard I hit the marble island. The silence in the penthouse was no longer empty. It was filled with the screaming truth of the numbers. They did not love me. They did not even like me. They tolerated me because I was useful. I was not Dominique the daughter. I was Dominique the ATM. I was the walking credit line that never charged interest. For years, I had told myself that this was just how our family worked, that because I had more, it was my duty to give more. I told myself that their demands were proof that they needed me. But looking at this ledger, I realized the sick reality. They did not need me. They needed my access. They needed my labor to subsidize their delusions of grandeur. I walked over to the trash can. I thought about throwing the binder away, but I stopped. No, This was not trash. This was evidence. This was the receipt for a transaction that was about to be voided. I picked up the binder and walked back to the safe. I locked it inside not to hide it, but to keep it safe for the war that was coming. If they wanted to talk about what family owed family, I was ready to show them the bill, and payment was long overdue. I picked up my phone and dialed the number on the back of the titanium card. The American Express Centurion line does not have hold music. It does not have automated menus asking you to press 1 for English. When you pay $5,000 a year in fees, a human being answers on the first ring. Good evening, Miss Carter. How can we assist you today? The voice was warm, professional, and soothing. It belonged to a woman named Sarah who had handled my travel bookings for years. She knew my preferences. She knew my schedule. But today she sounded hesitant. Hi, Sarah, I said, my voice sounding hollow in the empty penthouse. I need to review some recent activity on my secondary card, the one issued to my mother, Wanda Carter. There was a pause. The sound of keys clicking on a keyboard filled the silence. I could almost feel Sarah flinching on the other end of the line. Yes, Miss Carter. We flagged the account an hour ago for unusual velocity. We actually tried to call you. Apart from the $105,000 pending charge at the Plaza Hotel, there have been several other high-value transactions in the last 48 hours. Several others. My stomach dropped. I walked over to the window, looking out at the city lights blurring through my sudden tears. Read them to me, Sarah. Read all of them. Well, yesterday at 2 p.m., there was a charge of $15,000 at Serenity Springs Med Spa. The description reads, Bridal Glow Package for Party of 6. I closed my eyes. $15,000 for facials and massages. I remembered asking my mother last week if she wanted to go for a spa day with me just to bond. She told me she was too busy with church. She was too busy to spend time with me, but she had plenty of time to spend my money getting pampered with Chantel and her friends. Is there more? I asked, gripping the phone tighter. Yes. At 4:30 p.m. yesterday, a charge of $20,000 to Elite Limousines. It appears to be a deposit for a fleet of 6 Rolls-Royces for the wedding weekend. A fleet. They rented a fleet of cars. I drove a Porsche that I bought with my own bonus. They were renting a convoy of luxury vehicles to drive 3 miles from the church to the hotel. They were playing billionaires on a budget that did not belong to them. Miss Carter, Sarah said, her voice dropping to a whisper, these charges are significantly outside your normal spending patterns. Do you want me to mark them as fraud and freeze the card immediately? We can decline the hotel charge right now. My thumb hovered over the red end call button. This was it. I could end it right now. I could shut down the wedding instantly. I could strand them at the altar without a venue, a ride, or a facial. Justice was one word away. But I hesitated. And God help me, I hate that I hesitated. It was the little girl inside me. The little girl who just wanted her daddy to say he was proud without adding a request for money. The little girl who wanted her sister to hug her without looking for a gift receipt. If I froze the card now, they would spin the story. They would say it was a banking error. They would say I was just being difficult. They would never admit what they did. I needed them to admit it. I needed to look them in the eye and see if there was any shame left in their souls. I needed to give them one last chance to fix this before I burned the bridge. No, Sarah, I said slowly. Do not freeze the card yet. Not yet. Are you sure, Miss Carter? I am sure. But, Sarah, I need you to email me a full, itemized statement. Every single transaction, time-stamped and detailed. Send it to my secure work email. I need it in printable format. Consider it done. Is there anything else? No, thank you, Sarah. I hung up the phone. My heart was pounding, not with fear, but with a strange, morbid curiosity. I was going to give them a choice. I was going to present the evidence and ask for an explanation. If they apologized, if they showed even an ounce of regret, I might figure out a payment plan. I might forgive. But deep down, as I waited for the email notification to ping on my laptop, I knew the truth. They were not going to apologize. And I was about to walk into the lion's den, armed with nothing but a PDF file and a broken heart. I was giving them enough rope to hang themselves, and I had a terrible feeling they were going to use every inch of it. I pulled my Porsche into the driveway of the 2-story brick house in Cascade Heights. It was a beautiful home with manicured hedges and a fresh coat of cream paint. It was the picture of Black middle-class success. Neighbors waved as they walked their dogs, assuming the Carter family inside was living the American dream. They had no idea that the title deed in the county records office did not say Otis and Wanda Carter. It said Dominique Carter. I had paid off their mortgage 3 years ago as a 30th anniversary gift. I had freed them from debt, hoping it would bring them peace. Instead, it just freed up their cash flow to fund their delusions. I turned off the ignition and sat in the dark for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was the email from Sarah at American Express with the PDF attachment. The evidence. I took a deep breath. I was not walking in there as a daughter tonight. I was walking in as a landlord and a creditor. I unlocked the front door with my key. The smell hit me instantly. Pot roast, collard greens, and cornbread. It was the smell of Sunday dinners. It was the smell of comfort. For a second, my stomach grumbled, betraying my anger. It was a sensory trap designed to make me slip back into the role of the compliant child. I walked down the hallway toward the dining room. I expected silence. I expected tension. I expected to find them sitting around the table looking guilty, or at least worried about the confrontation that had happened at the bridal shop. I was wrong. Laughter boomed from the dining room. My father was chuckling deep and loud. My mother was humming a gospel song. The clinking of silverware against china was rhythmic and cheerful. They were eating. They were eating dinner as if they had not just committed grand larceny against their own child 4 hours ago. I stood in the archway unnoticed. My sister Chantel was the center of attention as always. She had pushed her plate aside and set up a ring light right on the dining table. She was staring into her iPhone, posing with her hand extended. "So you guys, I am so obsessed with this setting," she chirped into the phone. Her voice pitched up an octave for her followers. "Tyler has such amazing taste. We really wanted the ring to reflect our legacy, you know? Old money vibes only." Legacy. She was talking about legacy while wearing a ring that I knew for a fact Tyler had put on a payment plan because his family trust fund had strict limits on discretionary spending. My mother looked up and saw me. For a split second, her smile faltered, but then she recovered instantly. She did not look ashamed. She waved her fork at me. "Oh, look who decided to come down from her high horse," she said casually. "There is a plate in the kitchen if you want it. But wash your hands first. You look like you have been crying, and it is putting a damper on the mood." Chantel spun around in her chair, still holding the phone up. She pointed the camera right at me. "Hey guys, look! It is my big sis Dom," Chantel said to the live stream. She is a big-time banker. She is helping us plan the wedding of the century. Say hi to the chat, Dom. I stared at the phone screen. Comments were scrolling by. Sisters goals. Black excellence. She looks rich. The level of disrespect was breathtaking. They were using me as a prop in their reality show. They were sitting in a house I owned, eating food bought with money I gave them, celebrating a wedding funded by a card they stole from me, and they were smiling. I realized then that they did not fear me because they did not respect me. They thought my anger was temporary. They thought my boundaries were suggestions. They thought I would eat the pot roast, listen to the gospel music, and pay the bill like I always did. I did not say hi to the chat. I walked over to the table, reached behind the centerpiece, and yanked the power cord of the ring light out of the wall. The bright halo vanished, leaving the room in the dim yellow light of the chandelier. Chantel's mouth dropped open. "Hey, I was live!" she screeched. "Dinner is over," I said, my voice low and steady. "And so is the show." The room went quiet after I unplugged the light, but my mother did not scream. She did not throw a plate. Instead, she did something far more dangerous. She reached into her oversized tote bag and pulled out her worn leather Bible. The gold lettering on the cover was fading, but her weaponization of the pages inside was as sharp as ever. She placed the book on the table next to the pot roast, pushing aside the cornbread. She looked at me with eyes that were suddenly filled with tears. Not tears of remorse, tears of performance. She looked like a martyr about to be stoned. "Dominique," she whispered, her voice trembling with theatrical sadness. "I raised you better than this. I raised you to be a cheerful giver." The Bible says in Luke chapter 12, verse 48, that to whom much is given, much is required. God blessed you with that job. He blessed you with that talent for numbers. And now you want to hoard those blessings like a dragon sitting on gold? I stared at her, unable to believe what I was hearing. "Mom," I said, my voice tight, "we are not talking about charity. We are talking about theft. You took a card that did not belong to you without asking. That is not biblical. That is a crime." She shook her head, closing her eyes as if my words were physical blows. "Oh, ye of little faith," she moaned. Acts chapter 4 says the believers shared everything they had. No one claimed that any of their possessions was their own. We are a family, Dominique. What is yours is ours. We are one body. Why are you trying to amputate your own sister just to save some money that you cannot even take to heaven with you? Chantel chimed in, her voice small and wavering, playing the victim perfectly. "Yeah, Dom, you have so much. You live in the sky. You drive a Porsche. Why is it so hard for you to share just a little bit of your shine with me? Do you hate me that much?" "Stop it," I snapped. "Stop using God to justify your greed. I am not the bad guy here." My father stood up. He did not look at me. He looked at my mother. "Wanda, pray for her," he said solemnly. "The devil of greed has got a hold of her spirit. She is lost in the world of materialism. She needs Jesus to soften that heart of stone." And then, right there in the dining room of the house I had paid for, they dropped to their knees. My mother, my father, and my sister knelt on the hardwood floor. They held hands, forming a circle that explicitly excluded me. "Oh, Lord," my mother began, her voice rising in a preacher cadence. "We come to you tonight with heavy hearts. We lift up our daughter Dominique to you. Lord, she has lost her way. She has let the love of money poison her soul. She values a piece of plastic more than her own flesh and blood." "Amen," my father muttered. "Lord, please break these chains of selfishness," my mother cried out, rocking back and forth. "Open her eyes, Lord. Help her see that family is the only true wealth. Forgive her for her anger. Forgive her for her disrespect. She does not know what she is doing. Touch her heart, Jesus. Make her generous again. Make her the daughter we know she can be." I stood there watching them. It was the most grotesque display of manipulation I had ever witnessed. They were not praying for my soul. They were praying for my submission. They were using their faith as a shield to protect them from accountability. If I interrupted them, I was interrupting God. If I stayed angry, I was fighting against prayer. I looked at Chantel. She had one eye open, peeking to see if the performance was working. When she saw me looking, she quickly squeezed her eyes shut and muttered a loud hallelujah. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. This was not a family. This was a cult. And I was the sacrifice they were preparing to burn on the altar of their own vanity. I realized then that logic would never work here. You cannot reason with people who believe God gave them the right to rob you. I did not say amen. I turned around and walked out of the dining room, leaving them kneeling in their circle of lies. Prayer time was over. It was time for the plague. I did not join their prayer circle. I walked over to the dining table where my mother's leather Bible still sat next to the cooling pot roast. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folded American Express statement I had printed at the office. The paper was crisp and heavy in my hand. I slammed it down onto the wood surface right on top of the holy book they were using to justify their sin. The sound cracked through the room like a whip, interrupting their performance of piety. "This is not a blessing, Mom," I said, my voice trembling with controlled fury. "This is a crime scene. Look at the numbers. $105,000. My father opened one eye, peering up from his kneeling position. My mother stopped rocking back and forth. I pointed a manicured finger at the paper. "You have exactly 24 hours. You will call the plaza, you will cancel the venue, you will return the dress, and you will wire every single cent back to my account. If you do not, I am walking into the precinct and filing charges for identity theft and credit card fraud against all three of you." I waited for the panic. I waited for the apologies. I waited for my mother to realize she had pushed me too far. Instead, I heard a low, dry chuckle. Chantel stood up slowly, wiping the fake tears from her face. She smoothed down her skirt and walked over to the table. She picked up the bank statement, looked at it with boredom, and tossed it aside like it was junk mail. "You are not going to call the police, Dominique," she said, her voice dripping with amusement. "We both know that." "Try me," I warned, stepping closer to her. She smirked, crossing her arms over her chest. "You are a vice president at a major investment bank, Dom. You spent 10 years building that perfect, sterile reputation. You are terrified of scandal. Imagine the headlines in the Business Journal. Top banker arrests own mother. Imagine what your white colleagues would whisper in the break room." She took a step closer to me, invading my personal space, smelling of the expensive perfume I had bought her for Christmas. "You need this wedding just as much as I do," she whispered. "You need the photos. You need to look like you come from a good, respectable family. You need to show Tyler's family that we belong. If you arrest us, you destroy your own image. You will never do it because you care more about what people think than you care about the money." My mother nodded in agreement, standing up and brushing off her knees. "She is right, Dominique," my mother said, picking up her fork to resume eating as if nothing had happened. "You have too much to lose. Now stop this nonsense and sit down. Have some cornbread. The drama is giving me indigestion." I stood there, frozen. The air left my lungs. Chantel was right. For years, that fear had been my leash. I paid their bills to keep them quiet. I paid to hide the dysfunction. I paid so that when I walked into boardrooms, no one would know where I really came from. They had weaponized my success against me. They were betting on my silence. They were banking on my shame. My father chuckled, reaching for the butter. "She will calm down," he said to the room. "She always does." They thought they had checkmated me. They thought my pride was their insurance policy. But as I looked at my sister's smug face, I realized something terrifying and wonderful. The fear was gone. I did not care about the reputation anymore. If they wanted a scandal, I was going to give them a war. I turned around and walked out into the night, leaving the statement on the table. The bank was officially closed. The sun was barely up over the Atlanta skyline, but I was already wide awake. I had not slept. I sat at my dining room table, dressed in my full corporate armor, a crisp white silk blouse and a charcoal pencil skirt. I needed to feel like a shark, because I was about to enter bloody waters. My phone lay on the marble surface next to a cup of black coffee. It was 8 a.m. sharp, the opening bell for financial warfare. I picked up the phone and dialed the fraud department direct line. This time I did not ask for Sarah. I did not want the nice lady who booked my travel. I needed the cold, hard machinery of corporate security. "American Express Fraud Detection, this is Marcus. How can I help you?" The voice was deep and professional. "Good morning, Marcus. This is Dominique Carter, account ending in 4009. I am calling to report unauthorized activity on my secondary card." I paused, taking a sip of the bitter coffee. This was the point of no return. Once I said the words, there was no going back. No more family dinners. No more pretending. "Go ahead, Ms. Carter. Which transactions are you disputing?" "All of them," I said, my voice steady and devoid of emotion. "I am disputing the charge of $105,000 to the Plaza Hotel. I am disputing the $15,000 to Serenity Springs Spa. And I am disputing the $20,000 deposit to Elite Limousines." There was a moment of silence on the line. Even for a fraud specialist, these numbers were staggering. "I see Marcus said the typing on his end picking up speed. Ms. Carter, just to clarify, were these transactions made by a cardholder with access to the physical card?" "The physical card was removed from my safe without my permission," I replied. "The PIN code was obtained under false pretenses. I did not authorize these charges. I did not sign for them. This is identity theft and grand larceny." "Understood. I am initiating a Level 1 fraud alert. We are reversing the charges immediately. The vendors will be notified within the hour that the funds are being clawed back. We are also freezing all accounts associated with your Social Security number for your protection." Clawed back. It was a violent term for a violent act. The money was not just being stopped. It was being ripped away. "Thank you, Marcus," I said. "One more thing. If anyone tries to reactivate the card or calls claiming to be me, "We have set up a verbal password requirement," he interrupted. "Nobody accesses this account without it. You are on lockdown, Miss Carter." I hung up the phone. I sat there in the silence, visualizing the digital shockwave I had just sent out. At this very moment, a computer server in New York was sending a red flag to the accounting department at the Plaza Hotel. A notification was popping up on a screen, telling a frantic event planner that the 6-figure check for the Carter wedding had just bounced. I imagined my mother waking up in her comfortable bed in the house I paid for, thinking about what hat she would wear to the rehearsal dinner. She had no idea that the ground beneath her feet had just liquefied. She thought she was untouchable because she was my mother. She forgot that in the real world, Visa and MasterCard do not care about DNA. They only care about authorization, and hers had just been revoked. I stood up and walked to the window looking down at the city. I felt a strange mixture of nausea and adrenaline. I had just detonated a nuclear bomb in the middle of my own family. But as I watched the cars moving on the highway below, I realized something important. I was not the one who started this war. I was just the one finishing it. The phone in my hand started to vibrate. It was my mother. The fallout had begun. I was sitting in the gold room at the plaza, holding a silver spoon of truffle risotto to my lips. It was perfect. Everything was perfect. My mother was sitting across from me, debating whether we should have the Chilean sea bass or the filet mignon for the main course. I looked at the massive crystal chandelier sparkling above us and smiled. I knew Dom was probably cooling off right now. She always threw tantrums, but she always paid. She had too much pride to let her little sister get married in a basement. I took a bite of the risotto, closing my eyes and savoring the rich, earthy flavor. This was the life I was born for. This was the life Tyler and his trust fund were going to secure for me. Then the double doors swung open with a heavy thud. It was not a waiter refilling our champagne. It was Mr. Henderson, the general manager, and he was not smiling. Behind him stood 2 very large men in dark suits with earpieces. Hotel security. The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. The warm smell of expensive food was suddenly replaced by the cold scent of trouble. Mr. Henderson walked straight to the table, ignoring the bridal planner who tried to intercept him. He did not bow. He did not ask how the risotto was. He placed a piece of paper on the crisp white tablecloth right next to the floral centerpiece. "Ms. Carter," he said, his voice loud enough to echo off the hand-painted walls. "We have a serious problem." I laughed nervously, wiping my mouth with a linen napkin. "Is it the wine pairing, Mr. Henderson? Because I told you we prefer the Merlot over the Pinot Noir." "It is not the wine," he said, his face like stone. "It is the funding. 10 minutes ago, American Express issued a mandatory chargeback on the deposit for this venue. They have flagged the transaction as unauthorized fraud. The card used for this account has been reported stolen by the primary cardholder." My mother dropped her fork. It clattered loudly against the fine china, sounding like a gunshot in the quiet room. "That is a mistake," Wanda stammered, standing up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. "My daughter, Dominique, she is just being dramatic. She is having a bad day at work. I will call her right now and clear this up. It is just a misunderstanding." Mr. Henderson did not look at her. He looked directly at me. "Miss Carter, the total. Outstanding balance, including today's tasting, the flower order and the room block is $150,000. Unless you can produce that amount in a certified cashier check or a valid credit card in your name within the next 15 minutes, we will have to escort you off the premises immediately." $150,000. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands went numb. I looked at Tyler, who had been scrolling on his phone, oblivious to the disaster until he heard the number. He looked up, his eyes narrowing. "What is going on, Chantel?" Tyler asked, his voice tight and suspicious. "I thought you said your sister handled this. Why are they asking for money?" "She did. She is. Mom, call her!" I screamed, turning to my mother. "Call her right now! Fix this!" My mother was already dialing, her hands shaking so hard she almost dropped her phone. I watched her face. I watched the color leave her cheeks. I watched the hope drain out of her eyes as the call failed to connect instantly. She blocked me," Wanda whispered, horror filling her voice. "She blocked my number, Chantel. It goes straight to the operator." Mr. Henderson checked his Rolex. "You have 14 minutes, he said coldly, motioning to the guards. "And please, step away from the food. The tasting menu is for paying customers only." Security took a step forward, crossing their massive arms. I looked at the risotto I hadn't finished. I looked at Tyler, who was looking at me like I was a stranger he had just met. For the first time in my life, the delusion cracked. I realized that without Dominique backing me up, I was not a princess. I was just a girl with empty pockets, sitting in a room I could not afford, about to be thrown out on the street. I was sitting in my glass-walled office overlooking Midtown, trying to focus on a merger spreadsheet. I thought I had contained the fire. I thought by freezing the accounts and blocking their numbers, I had forced them into a corner where they would have to face reality. But I forgot one thing. A cornered animal does not think logically. It bites. And in the 21st century, the sharpest teeth are digital. My phone started buzzing. Not the rhythmic vibration of a call, but the rapid-fire staccato of notifications. Ping, ping, ping. It sounded like a machine gun. I glanced at the screen. It was not text from my mother. It was notifications from Instagram, TikTok, and even LinkedIn. I unlocked the phone and opened Instagram. My direct messages were flooded with hateful comments from strangers. "Snake, jealous witch, you are disgusting." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. I clicked on a tag and there it was. A video posted by Chantel an hour ago. It already had 2 million views. I put in my AirPods and pressed play. Chantel was sitting in her car. She was not wearing the designer makeup she usually plastered on. Her face was bare. Her eyes were red and puffy. She had perfected the look of the broken victim. "Hey guys," she whispered into the camera, wiping away a tear. "I did not want to make this video. I really did not. But I am just so heartbroken right now. You guys have been following my wedding journey for months. You know how excited I was. Well, today, my sister decided to destroy everything." She paused to sob. It was a masterful performance. "My sister Dominique is very wealthy," she continued. "She is a big banker. She makes millions. She promised to pay for my venue as a gift. She gave me her card. She told me to book the plaza. But today, right in the middle of my tasting, she cut off all the funding. She called the hotel and accused me of stealing. She had security throw me out." I watched in horror as she looked directly into the lens. "She did it because she is jealous, guys. She is 32 and single. She cannot stand that I found love before she did. She wants me to be miserable just like her. Now I have lost the venue. I have lost the deposit. I might lose the wedding. I just do not know why my own blood would hate me this much." I felt like I couldn't breathe. She was twisting the truth so violently it made me dizzy. She left out the part where she stole the card. She left out the forged signature. She left out the years of me paying her bills. I scrolled down to the comments. The internet mob had already lit their torches. Cancel Dominique Carter. Imagine being that rich and that stingy. She sounds bitter and lonely. Boycott her bank. Then I saw the worst part. At the bottom of the caption, Chantel had pinned a link. If anyone wants to help save my wedding, here is my Cash App. Anything helps against this toxic abuse. She was monetizing the lie. She was using my reputation as a stepping stone to crowdfund her party. She was not just destroying my relationship with the family. She was coming for my career. My office door opened. My assistant stuck her head in, looking pale. "Miss Carter," she said quietly, "HR just called. They have been getting emails, hundreds of them. People are demanding you be fired for financial abuse." I dropped the phone on my desk. The screen cracked. I looked at the spiderweb fracture over Chantel's crying face. I realized then that this was not a family dispute anymore. This was a hit job. Chantel had declared total war. She thought she could shame me into submission. She thought the pressure of public opinion would make me open my wallet again. But she made a fatal miscalculation. She assumed I had shame left to lose. I picked up the cracked phone. I did not reply to the comments. I did not record a defense video. I dialed my lawyer. It was time to sue my sister for defamation. The walk to the managing director's office usually felt like a victory lap. I was the star earner, the woman who closed the impossible deals. But today it felt like a walk to the gallows. The open plan trading floor was silent, but I could feel the eyes of the junior analysts burning into my back. They were not looking at me with admiration anymore. They were looking at their phones, then looking at me, then whispering behind cupped hands. I knew exactly what they were watching. They were watching my sister cry on TikTok about how I ruined her life. I stepped into Mr. Blackwood's office. The glass walls offered a panoramic view of the city, but right now, the room felt like a cage. Mr. Blackwood did not offer me a seat. He was standing by the window holding his iPad. He turned around and his face was unreadable. That was worse than anger. It was the cold detachment of a man calculating a loss. "Dominique," he said, his voice flat, "we have a problem." He slid the iPad across the mahogany desk. I did not want to look, but I had to. It was a screenshot of an email inbox. The subject lines were all the same. "Fire Dominique Carter. Boycott the bank. Justice for Chantel." Our public relations department has received over 500 emails in the last 2 hours, he continued. Our social media pages are being flooded with negative comments. Clients are asking if the woman handling their portfolios is the same woman accused of financially abusing her own family on the internet. I felt the blood rush to my face. It was the specific kind of humiliation that comes from working twice as hard to prove you belong, only to have your own blood drag you back down. "Mr. Blackwood, this is a personal matter," I said, keeping my voice steady. "My sister is upset because I stopped funding a wedding she could not afford. The allegations are false. I am the victim of theft, not the perpetrator of abuse." Mr. Blackwood held up a hand, stopping me mid-sentence. "Dominique, I do not care about the truth. I care about the noise. We are an institutional bank. We trade on stability. We trade on discretion. We cannot have a vice president involved in a viral internet brawl. It looks messy. It looks unstable." He leaned forward, placing his hands on the desk. You have worked hard to get here. You have broken ceilings. But right now, you are a liability. I cannot have clients thinking our money managers are emotionally volatile or cruel. The injustice of it burned my throat. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him that I was the most stable person in my entire bloodline. But I knew that as a Black woman in corporate America, I did not have the luxury of an outburst. So what are you saying? I asked quietly. I am saying you have 48 hours, Mr. Blackwood said. Make this go away. Get your sister to take down the video. Issue a joint statement. Settle it. I do not care how much it costs you. If this is still a story on Monday morning, do not bother coming in. We will accept your resignation effective immediately. I walked out of his office feeling numb. The glass walls of the bank felt fragile. My entire career, the fortress I had built, brick by brick, was shaking. Because Chantel wanted a party she did not pay for. She knew exactly where to hit me. She knew I valued my career above everything, and she was holding it hostage. I went to the bathroom and locked myself in a stall. I did not cry. I stared at the door and realized that my family had finally managed to do the one thing no market crash had ever done. They had compromised my future. And for that, there would be no forgiveness. While I was sitting in my office trying to salvage my career, my father was busy ensuring that our family destruction would be total and irreversible. Otis Carter had never been a man who handled humiliation well. To him, the scene at the bridal salon and the rejection at the plaza were not just setbacks. They were attacks on his manhood. He could not go back to Tyler's parents and admit that he was broke. He could not tell the Sterlings that the wedding was off because his daughter closed the bank. He needed cash, and he needed it immediately. He drove his aging Lincoln to a part of town that he usually pretended did not exist. He pulled up behind a nondescript check-cashing storefront on Buford Highway. He was not there to cash a check. He was there to see a man named Big T, who specialized in high-risk, short-term lending. My father walked in clutching a leather portfolio, his hands sweating against the steering wheel. Inside that portfolio was the deed to the house in Cascade Heights, the house that I owned, the house that was titled solely in the name of Dominique Carter. He sat across from Big T, a man with gold teeth and dead eyes. My father placed the deed on the metal desk. I need $150,000 cash, today, my father said, trying to sound authoritative but failing miserably. Big T looked at the deed. He flipped through the pages. This property is prime real estate, Otis, but the name on the title says Dominique Carter. That is not you. My father did not flinch. That is my daughter, he lied. She holds the title for tax purposes, but it is my house. I paid for it. I built it. I have power of attorney. Big T slid a single sheet of paper across the desk. It was a promissory note with an interest rate that was technically illegal in the state of Georgia. If you have power of attorney, then sign here. If the money is not returned in 30 days plus 20% interest, we take the house. No courts, no eviction notices. We just change the locks. My father looked at the line at the bottom of the page. It required the signature of the property owner. He knew what he was about to do was a felony. He knew that forging my signature on a loan document using my property as collateral was a crime that carried a prison sentence. But then he thought about Tyler's father. He thought about the smirk on Tyler's face when he called us ghetto. He thought about the wedding guests whispering that the Carters were frauds. His pride was a monster that demanded to be fed, even if the food was his own freedom. "I will have the money back in a week," my father said. "Once the wedding gifts come in, I will pay you off." He picked up the heavy black pen. He did not hesitate. He did not shake. He pressed the tip to the paper and signed Dominique Carter in a script that looked frighteningly similar to mine. He had spent years watching me sign checks for him. He had practiced this betrayal 1,000 times in his head. Big T took the paper, checked the signature, and nodded. He reached under the desk and pulled out a duffel bag. 150,000. Do not make me come looking for you, Otis. My father walked out of that back room with a bag full of cash, feeling like a hero. He thought he had solved the problem. He thought he had outsmarted me. He drove straight to the Plaza Hotel, ready to throw the money on the counter and demand an apology. He had no idea that he had just handed me the final nail for his coffin. He had just turned a family dispute into a federal case, and this time I was not going to pay the bail. The underground parking garage of my building was usually the one place where I felt safe. It was temperature-controlled, well-lit, and guarded by security. It was the fortress I paid a premium for to keep the chaos of the world away from my sanctuary. But as I rounded the corner to my reserved spot, I slammed on the brakes of my rental car. My breath hitched in my throat. My Porsche Panamera, the car I had bought with my first major bonus, the car that symbolized my independence, was not gleaming silver anymore. It was bleeding. Bright red spray paint dripped down the entire passenger side. It was not random graffiti. It was not a gang tag. It was a message. One word scrawled in jagged, angry letters that stretched from the front fender to the rear taillight. Selfish. I sat in the rental car, staring at the vandalism. The red paint looked violent under the fluorescent lights. I did not need to check the security cameras to know who did this. A stranger would have keyed the car. A stranger would have stolen the tires. Only family attacks your character while destroying your property. Only my father wrote his S with that specific loop at the top. I stepped out of the car. The smell of aerosol paint was still heavy in the air, mixing with the smell of exhaust. I walked over to my Porsche. I reached out to touch the paint, but pulled my hand back. It was still wet. They had been here recently. They had somehow slipped past security, probably using the spare key fob I had given my mother for emergencies years ago. For a moment, I thought I was going to cry. I thought I would fall apart right there on the concrete floor. I had spent my entire life trying to be good, trying to be generous, trying to prove that I was worthy of their love, and this was their response. Vandalism, intimidation, calling me selfish on a car that I had used to drive them to church every Sunday. But as I stared at that red word, something inside me shifted. The sadness did not come. The grief evaporated. In its place, a cold, hard resolve settled into my bones. It was the feeling of a switch being flipped in a dark room, illuminating everything with blinding clarity. They were not my family. They were my enemies. And you do not negotiate with terrorists who bomb your life because you cut off their funding. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. My hand was steady. My heart rate was slow. I scrolled past my mother's missed calls. I scrolled past Chantel's texts demanding I fix this. I tapped on the contact labeled Richard, personal attorney. He answered on the second ring, sounding surprised to hear from me so late. "Dominique, is everything all right?" "No, Richard. Nothing is all right, I said, my voice echoing in the empty garage, but it is about to be handled. I walked around the car, taking photos of the damage from every angle. Flash, flash, flash. Every picture was another nail in their legal coffin. I need you to file the paperwork, I said. All of it. Richard hesitated. You mean the fraud report for the credit card? No, I said. I mean everything. I want to file for a restraining order against Otis, Wanda, and Chantel Carter. I want to press criminal charges for vandalism and destruction of private property. I want to sue for defamation regarding the social media posts. And I want to start the eviction process on the Cascade Heights property immediately. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Dominique Richard said softly, "These are nuclear options. If we do this, we are sending your parents to court, maybe even jail. There is no coming back from this. Are you sure you want to go this far?" I looked at the word selfish dripping down the side of my car. I thought about the $100,000. I thought about the lies. I thought about the years I spent buying their love only to realize it was never for sale. It was just a rental. I have never been more sure of anything in my life, Richard, I replied. Burn it down. I want them to lose everything. I sat in the darkness of my penthouse living room with only the blue light of my laptop illuminating my face. The city of Atlanta sprawled out below me, a grid of golden lights that usually made me feel powerful. Tonight, however, those lights just looked like cold, indifferent witnesses to my destruction. On my screen, the email from Human Resources was still open. The subject line read, "Urgent meeting regarding personal conduct." My family had done it. They had found the one thing I valued more than my money, my reputation. I knew exactly what they were doing. They were betting on my silence. They were banking on the fact that Dominique Carter, the perfect vice president, would never let a public scandal drag her down. They knew I would pay any price to keep my name clean. They thought this was checkmate. But they forgot one thing. In the world of high finance, you do not win by reacting. You win by manipulating the market until your opponent exposes their neck. I picked up my phone. My thumb hovered over the family group chat. It was flooded with messages from my mother, demands from my father, and links to Chantel's TikTok videos, which were still racking up views. I took a deep breath. I had to make this convincing. I had to sound broken. I had to sound like the little girl who was terrified of Daddy raising his voice. I typed slowly, letting the words taste like bile in my mouth. Mom, please stop. HR just emailed me. They are threatening to fire me. I cannot lose this job. It is my whole life. I surrender. I will fix the payments. Just please tell Chantel to take down the video. I am sorry. I hit send. The message bubble turned blue. I felt a wave of physical nausea wash over me. It was the most humiliating text I had ever written, but it was necessary. It was the bait. The response was immediate. The 3 little dots bubbled up on the screen instantly. They had been waiting. They had been watching their phones like vultures circling a dying animal. My mother's reply popped up first. It was not a thank you. It was not an apology for the vandalism or the lies. It was a victory lap. I knew you would come to your senses, Dominique. God has humbled you. We need the money by noon tomorrow. Certified funds only. The hotel does not trust your credit cards anymore after the stunt you pulled. Then came Chantel. I will take the video down when the check clears, and not a moment before. You embarrassed me, Dom. You have a lot of making up to do. I closed my eyes and let out a long, slow breath. They were celebrating right now. I could see it clearly. My father was probably pouring a drink, leaning back in his recliner, laughing about how he had disciplined his unruly daughter. My mother was probably praising Jesus for softening my heart, while simultaneously planning how to spend the extra money she would inevitably ask for. Chantel was likely smirking at her phone, feeling the rush of power that comes from bringing a giant to their knees. They were so arrogant. They thought they had broken me. They thought I was coming back to the fold to be their ATM again. They did not understand that I was not waving a white flag. I was waving a red cape. I was drawing the bull into the arena for the final slaughter. My phone buzzed again. It was my father. "Family dinner tonight, 7 sharp. Do not be late. We need to discuss how we move forward as a united front." I typed back 2 words. "Understood, Dad." I set the phone down on the marble table. A united front. That was hilarious. They wanted a dinner to cement my submission. They wanted to gloat in person. Perfect. That was exactly what I needed. I needed them in one room. I needed them comfortable. I needed them arrogant enough to admit everything, while I sat there with a smile on my face and a wire taped to my chest. I stood up and walked to my closet. I was going to dinner, but I was not going to eat. I was going to feed them the rope they would use to hang themselves. I parked my car a block away from the house in Cascade Heights. I needed the walk to center myself. I needed to slow my heart rate down because for the next hour, I was not Dominique the shark of Wall Street. I was Dominique the defeated daughter returning to the fold. I checked my purse one last time. Inside, hidden in the lining, was a high-fidelity digital voice recorder. I clicked it on. The tiny red light blinked once, confirming that the trap was set. I walked up the driveway with my head bowed, practicing my look of shame. When I opened the front door, the smell of mac and cheese and pot roast hit me. It was the smell of my childhood, the smell of every apology I had ever made for things I did not do. They were waiting for me in the dining room. The table was set with the good china. My mother, Wanda, was at the head of the table, smiling like a benevolent dictator who had just successfully suppressed a rebellion. Chantel was scrolling on her phone, but she looked up and smirked when she saw me. My father, Otis, was carving the roast, his movements slow and deliberate. "Sit down, Dominique," my mother said, gesturing to my usual chair. "We are glad you finally came to your senses. We were worried you were going to let that pride of yours ruin this family." I sat down. I kept my purse on my lap, unzipped just a fraction to ensure the microphone had a clear path. I looked down at my plate, avoiding their eyes, playing the part of the chastised child perfectly. "I am sorry, Mom," I said, my voice quiet and shaky. "I was just scared about my job. I overreacted." "You certainly did," my father grunted, slapping a piece of meat onto my plate. "Calling the bank like that, threatening your own blood with police. It was shameful, Dominique. Just shameful." "I know," I said, taking a sip of water to clear the lump in my throat. "I just want to make sure we are clear on everything so I can fix it. The bank asked me about the signature on the charge at the plaza. They said it did not match mine." My mother waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, please. I signed it for you. You gave me access to the safe, didn't you? That implies permission to use the card. We were doing you a favor by handling the deposit while you were busy working. It was practically a proxy signature." I nodded slowly, letting the recorder catch every syllable of her confession. "Okay, Mom, I can explain that to them. But Dad, what about the other thing? I got an alert about a lien on the house, a short-term loan." The room went quiet for a second. My father put down his carving knife. He wiped his mouth with a napkin and looked at me with a mixture of annoyance and pity. "We needed cash flow, Dominique," he said, his voice hard. "After you froze the cards, we had to pay the vendors. I took a loan against the equity. It is temporary. Once the wedding gifts come in, we will pay it off." "But Dad," I pressed, leaning forward slightly, "the lender said the document was signed by me. Yesterday. I was at work all day." My father let out a loud, exasperated sigh. He looked at me like I was an idiot who did not understand how the world worked. "Dominique, look at me. You are my daughter. I put the roof over your head for 18 years. I raised you. Your assets are my assets." "But that is forgery, Dad," I whispered, pushing him to say the words. "If I didn't hold the pen, it is forgery." He slammed his hand on the table, making the silverware jump. "Whether you signed or I signed, what does it matter?" he shouted, his voice booming in the dining room. "You have to pay the debt for this house anyway. It is all coming out of your pocket in the end. I just expedited the process. Stop acting like a lawyer and start acting like a daughter." I froze. There it was. The confession. The admission of guilt. The absolute confirmation that they saw my identity as something they could wear whenever it suited them. I looked at Chantel. She was giggling. "You heard Dad, Dom. Just pay the bill and shut up." I forced a smile. A weak, trembling smile that hid the predator waking up inside me. "You are right, Dad," I said softly, reaching into my bag and turning off the recorder. "It does not matter who signed, because everyone is going to pay what they owe." I stood up, leaving my food untouched. I had exactly what I needed. The Capital City Club was the kind of place where decisions about the Atlanta skyline were made over scotch and cigars. It was a fortress of old money and quiet power, exactly the kind of place my family desperately pretended to belong to. I walked past the portrait of a former governor and spotted Nathaniel Vance sitting in a leather wingback chair by the fireplace. He was the Sterling's family attorney, the gatekeeper to their dynasty. He looked at his watch as I approached, his expression one of mild irritation. To him, I was just the sister of the gold digger who was about to dilute his client's bloodline. Mr. Vance did not stand up when I arrived. He simply gestured to the empty chair opposite him. "Mrs. Carter," he said, his voice dry as parchment, "I must admit I was surprised by your urgent request. The wedding is in 48 hours. I assume this is about the prenuptial agreement your sister has been refusing to sign?" I sat down and placed my alligator skin briefcase on the low table between us. I did not order a drink. I did not make small talk about the weather. "It is not about the prenup, Mr. Vance," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "It is about fraud, and it is about saving your clients millions of dollars." I clicked the latches of my briefcase. The sound was loud in the quiet room. I pulled out a thick red file and slid it across the polished wood. "Inside that file is the real financial history of the Carter family," I continued. "You will find my sister's credit score, which is below 500. You will find 3 maxed-out credit cards she hid from Tyler. And most importantly, you will find a police report I drafted this morning, but have not yet filed, regarding a forged loan document using my property as collateral." Vance raised an eyebrow. He opened the file. I watched his eyes scan the pages. I watched the arrogance drain from his face, replaced by the cold calculation of a man realizing he had almost let a wolf into the henhouse. He flipped through the evidence of the stolen American Express card and the fake loan my father had taken out with the loan shark. "Good God," Vance muttered, closing the file. "They're insolvent. They are funding this entire charade with stolen money and high-interest debt. Tyler has no idea. He thinks your father is a successful real estate investor." "My father manages a duplex I bought him," I corrected. "That is his empire." Vance reached for his phone. "I have to call Tyler immediately. We have to call off the wedding. The liability here is catastrophic." I reached out and placed my hand over his phone. The gesture was bold, bordering on disrespectful, but it stopped him. "No, Mr. Vance," I said softly. "You are not going to call Tyler. Not yet." He looked at me confused. "Mrs. Carter, why on earth would you want to protect them after what they did to you?" "I am not protecting them," I said, leaning in closer, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I am hunting them. If you cancel the wedding now, privately, they will spin the story. They will tell Tyler that I am a jealous liar. They will tell the world that the Sterling family is racist and classist. You will be tied up in a PR nightmare for months. Chantel is very good at playing the victim." Vance paused, his hand hovering over the phone. He was listening. "I want this to end in a way that leaves no room for doubt," I continued. "I want them to expose themselves. I want the police to arrive at the moment they think they have won. I have arranged for the authorities to execute the arrest warrants at the ceremony. All I need from you is silence. Let the wedding proceed. Let them spend every last dime they stole. And when the handcuffs click, Tyler will see with his own eyes exactly who he was about to marry." Vance looked at me for a long time. He looked at the red file, then back at my face. He saw the cold resolve in my eyes. He saw a woman who was willing to burn her own family tree to the ground to kill the parasites living in it. He slowly withdrew his hand from his phone. He picked up his glass of scotch and took a sip. "You are a terrifying woman, Miss Carter." Vance said, a hint of admiration in his voice. "The Sterling family will not forget this. We will ensure your assets are protected from any fallout." We shook hands. It was the coldest handshake of my life. I walked out of the club, leaving the evidence behind. I had just secured the most powerful ally in the city. My family thought they were walking down the aisle toward a fortune. They had no idea they were walking straight into a federal indictment. The morning sun sliced through the blinds of Marcus Hale's office, but it brought no warmth to the room. Marcus was a forensic accountant I had used for corporate audits for years. He was a man who found hidden assets for Fortune 500 companies and tracked embezzled funds across international borders. He had seen everything. But today he looked uncomfortable. He sat across from me, tapping a black pen against a stack of documents, unable to meet my eyes. "Dominique," he said finally, his voice low and serious. "I have gone through your father's financials. I have tracked the loans, the credit cards, and the bank transfers. The loan from the shark on Buford Highway is real, but that is not the worst part." I leaned back in the leather chair, crossing my arms. I thought I was unshockable. I thought I knew the depths of my father's incompetence. What could be worse than a predatory loan with a 200% interest rate? I asked. Marcus slid a single sheet of paper across the mahogany desk. It was a transaction history for an account I did not recognize. "The Teachers' Retirement System of Georgia," Marcus said, pointing to the header. This is your mother's pension fund. She worked 30 years in the school district to build this. It was supposed to be her safety net. It was supposed to be the money that kept them fed when they got too old to work. I looked at the bottom line. The balance was 0. Otis liquidated it, Marcus whispered. He forged her signature on a hardship withdrawal request 6 months ago. He took the lump sum, $240,000, and it is gone. All of it. I felt a wave of nausea roll over me. He stole her future. He stole the money she broke her back for in a classroom for 3 decades, and he blew it. But that is not the part that makes me sick. Dominique Marcus continued pulling out another document. When the pension fund flagged the withdrawal as suspicious, they called your mother to confirm. We found the recording in the compliance log. He pressed play on his laptop. The room filled with the crackly sound of my mother's voice. Yes, I authorized it, Wanda said on the recording, her voice sounding tired but firm. My husband handles our finances. Just release the funds. We have expenses. I stared at the laptop. She knew. She knew he was robbing her blind. She knew he was eating her future to feed his ego. And she let him do it. She lied to the auditors to protect the man who was destroying her. I realized then that I was not dealing with a victim and a villain. I was dealing with a toxic ecosystem. My mother was not a helpless woman being taken advantage of. She was a willing accomplice in her own destruction. She preferred to be broke and look rich than to admit her husband was a failure. She chose the illusion of a happy marriage over the reality of survival. I felt a physical need to scrub my skin. It was disgusting. The rot in my family went so deep it had infected the bone. They were cannibals, eating pieces of each other just to stay alive for one more day of pretending. I looked up at Marcus. My eyes were dry. My heart was stone. Print it all, I said, standing up. Print the pension withdrawal. Print the transcript of her call. Print the loan shark note. But Dom, Marcus said, looking worried, if you use this, if you expose this, you are not just embarrassing them, you are destroying them. You are proving that your father is a thief and your mother is a fool. I picked up my bag. The image of them kneeling in the dining room, praying for me to be generous, flashed in my mind. They had prayed to God for money while sitting on a pile of stolen cash. They destroyed themselves, Marcus, I replied, walking to the door. I am just the one turning on the lights so everyone can see the wreckage. Pack the files. We have a wedding to attend. The sun had set over Atlanta, casting long shadows across my penthouse bedroom. It was the night before the wedding. The silence in my apartment felt heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. I was standing in my walk-in closet, staring at the garment bag hanging on the valet hook. My phone buzzed on the velvet ottoman, breaking the trance. It was Chantel. I looked at the screen. A picture of us from 5 years ago flashed back at me. We looked happy in the photo, but I remembered that day clearly. I had paid for that vacation too. I took a deep breath and swiped answer. Hey, big sis, she chirped, her voice dripping with a sugary sweetness that made my teeth ache. It was the voice she used when she wanted something. It was the voice of a predator disguised as a puppy. I am just calling to do a final vibe check, she continued, not waiting for me to speak. I know you said you handled the payments and everything is back on track, but I really need you to come correct with the wedding gift tomorrow. Tyler and I are looking at a vacation home in the Hamptons, and honestly, we are counting on your envelope to cover the down payment. So please make sure it is thick, okay? I gripped the phone tight enough to crack the screen protector. She was asking me to buy her a house while she was actively stealing mine. "I will make sure the gift is substantial, Chantel," I said, keeping my voice low and submissive. "You will not have to worry about money after tomorrow." "Good," she sighed. "Oh, and one more thing, Dom. Do not try to show off. I know you like your expensive designer labels, but tomorrow is about me. Wear something beige or gray. I do not want you distracting people from the bride. You know how you get with your need for attention. It is my day, not a fashion show for bank executives." The irony was suffocating. She was calling me an attention seeker, while live streaming her entire life on a phone I paid for. "Don't worry, Chantel," I replied, my voice steady. "I will be wearing something very appropriate. I promise you, nobody will be looking at me for the wrong reasons." She hung up without saying "I love you." She hung up without asking how I was. She just wanted to secure the asset. I tossed the phone onto the ottoman and turned back to the garment bag. The zipper made a sharp hissing sound as I pulled it down. The plastic fell away, revealing the fabric underneath. It was not beige. It was not gray. It was not a dress that faded into the background. It was a custom-tailored Alexander McQueen power suit in a shade of red so deep and vibrant it looked like fresh arterial blood. It was sharp. It was aggressive. It was the color of a warning sign. It was the color of a matador stepping into the ring to face a bull that had been goring him for years. I ran my hand over the lapel. Chantel wanted me to be invisible. She wanted the quiet, obedient banker who signed the checks and sat in the back row. But that woman had died the moment they vandalized my car. I looked at myself in the full-length mirror. Tomorrow, I was not going to be a guest. I was not going to be a sister. I was going to be the executioner. And I was going to wear the color of the carnage I was about to unleash. Sleep tight, Chantel. Enjoy your last night of delusion. Because when the sun comes up, the bank comes to collect. The only light in my office came from the city skyline outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. It was 3 a.m. The world was asleep, but I was wide awake, staring at the document on my desk. It was a standard Georgia real estate purchase agreement. Next to it was a notice to vacate. The address listed on both was the house in Cascade Heights, the house where my parents slept, the house where I had eaten dinner just hours ago while recording their confession. My hand hovered over the signature line, holding my heavy black fountain pen. For a moment, the silence of the room felt suffocating. This was the nuclear option. Suing them for credit card fraud was one thing, but selling the house out from under them? Putting my own mother and father on the street? It felt cold. It felt cruel. It felt like something a villain would do. A memory flashed in my mind. I saw my mother planting hydrangeas in the front yard of that house the day I bought it for them. I saw my father grilling on the back deck, telling his friends that his daughter made it big. For a split second, the little girl inside me wanted to put the pen down. She wanted to tear up the papers and just pay the bills one more time. She wanted to believe that if she was just good enough, just generous enough, they would finally love her. But then I heard it. The memory shifted. The warm sunlight of the garden was replaced by the harsh, fluorescent glare of the bridal salon. I heard Tyler's voice, smooth and condescending. "It looks very ghetto." I saw the look on his face, the absolute certainty that I was beneath him. And then I saw my mother. I replayed the moment in my mind. She did not slap him. She did not defend me. She nodded. She agreed with the man who called her daughter trash just so she could keep her proximity to his money. She chose a stranger over her own flesh and blood because the stranger came with a trust fund, and I only came with hard work. The hesitation vanished. The guilt evaporated like mist in the sun. They did not love me. They loved the house. They loved the car. They loved the credit limit. They had taken my kindness and weaponized it against me for a decade. If I didn't sign this paper, I was not being a good daughter. I was being a willing victim. I was teaching them that they could abuse me and I would still provide the roof over their heads. I gripped the pen tighter until my knuckles turned white. I am not your bank anymore, I whispered to the empty room. And I am certainly not your doormat. I pressed the nib to the crisp white paper. The ink flowed dark and permanent. I signed my name, Dominique Carter. With that signature, I transformed from their child into their landlord. And I was a landlord who had just closed the deal of a lifetime. I closed the folder and placed it in my briefcase next to the red Alexander McQueen suit. I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. It was the calm before the storm. Tomorrow was the wedding. Tomorrow was the day I would stand up in a church and object. But I wouldn't be objecting to the marriage. I would be objecting to my own erasure. The papers were signed. The eviction was legal. The trap was set. Sleep well, Mother, because tomorrow you wake up to a nightmare. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel did not look like a wedding venue. It looked like a botanical garden that had been dipped in gold and suffocated by vanity. There were walls of white hydrangeas and cascading orchids that probably cost more than a 4-year college degree. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and even more expensive denial. It was beautiful in the way a toxic flower is beautiful. You could admire the colors, but if you got too close, the poison would kill you. I sat in the front row of the bride's side. Chantel had specifically asked me to blend in, to wear beige or gray, to become part of the wallpaper. Instead, I was wearing the blood-red Alexander McQueen suit. In a sea of pastels and cream-colored tuxedos, I looked like an open wound. I looked like a warning flare. I felt the eyes of the guests burning into my back. I heard the whispers. Why is the sister wearing red? Is that a statement? I crossed my legs and smoothed the sharp crease of my trousers. I caught the eye of Nathaniel Vance, the Sterling family attorney sitting across the aisle. He gave me a barely perceptible nod. The trap was primed. Then the string quartet swelled into a dramatic crescendo. The heavy double doors at the back of the room swung open. My parents entered first. Otis and Wanda Carter walked down the aisle with their chins held so high, I was surprised they didn't trip. My father was strutting. He was wearing a tuxedo that he had paid for with money borrowed from a violent loan shark, but he wore it like a king. He waved to the guests on the groom's side, flashing a smile that said, "Look at what I created." My mother was dabbing at dry eyes with a lace handkerchief, acting out the role of the overcome matriarch. She looked at the crystal chandeliers with a hunger that made my stomach turn. They were soaking it in. They truly believed they had pulled off the heist of the century. They thought they had successfully sold their lie to the highest bidder. And then came Chantel. The guests gasped. She did look stunning, I will give her that. She was wearing the custom gown she had stolen my credit card to buy. The diamond tiara sparkled under the lights. She walked slowly, savoring every second of attention. She looked like a queen surveying her kingdom. As she passed my seat, she turned her head slightly. She looked me up and down, taking in the red suit. Her eyes narrowed for a fraction of a second, But then she smirked. It was a look of pure triumph. She thought she had won. She thought my presence here meant I had paid the bills and accepted my defeat. She turned her attention back to the altar where Tyler was waiting. She walked toward him, ready to seal the deal that would fund her lifestyle forever. I watched her back. I watched the long train of the dress sweeping over the marble floor. I looked at my watch. It was exactly 2 minutes past the hour. In the lobby just outside those double doors, I knew that 4 officers from the NYPD Fraud Division were currently showing their badges to the concierge. I leaned back in my gold chair. The smile that spread across my face was not the smile of a sister. It was the smile of a predator who has just watched the prey step into the snare. He was blessing a union built on stolen credit cards and forged loan documents. I sat there in my blood-red suit, listening to him talk about truth and honesty, while my sister stood at the altar in a dress that legally belonged to the state of Georgia evidence locker. The room was so quiet you could hear the candles flickering. My mother was dabbing her eyes in the front row, performing her role as the emotional mother of the bride with Oscar-worthy dedication. My father stood tall, puffing out his chest, looking at the Sterling family like he had conquered them. They had no idea that the clock was ticking down the final seconds of their freedom. Then came the moment. The priest paused. He looked out over the congregation. The silence in the room deepened, becoming thick and suffocating. If anyone here present knows of any just cause why these two may not be lawfully joined together, speak now or forever hold your peace. It is usually a rhetorical question, a formality. Nobody ever speaks. But today the silence did not last. I gripped the back of the gold chair in front of me. The metal was cool under my palm. I took a slow breath. I stood up. The sound of my chair legs scraping against the marble floor echoed like a gunshot. A collective gasp swept through the room. It was a physical wave of shock. 300 heads turned in unison. All eyes were on the woman in the red suit. Chantel spun around at the altar. Her face was not beautiful anymore. It was twisted in a snarl of pure, unadulterated rage. Her eyes screamed at me. She looked like she wanted to run down the aisle and strangle me with her bare hands. "Dominique, sit down," my father hissed from the front row, his voice trembling with fury. "Do not do this. Do not, you dare, do this." I did not look at him. I did not look at my mother, who had frozen mid-sob, her handkerchief pressed to her mouth in horror. I looked past them. I looked directly at Tyler Sterling. He looked confused. He looked at me, then at his lawyer, Nathaniel Vance, who was sitting calmly with his arms crossed. I smoothed the front of my jacket. I did not shout. I did not scream. My voice was calm, steady, and professional. It was the voice I used to close million-dollar deals. It was the voice of absolute authority. "I am not here to object to the marriage," I said, projecting my voice to the back of the room without a microphone. "I am simply here to facilitate a transition." "Transition?" Tyler asked, his voice cracking. "What are you talking about, Dominique?" "I am sorry for the interruption, Tyler," I continued, my eyes locking onto his, "but I felt it was only fair to warn you. You cannot marry Chantel right now, not because I object, but because the 4 detectives from the NYPD Fraud Division waiting just outside those double doors need to take the bride into custody." The room erupted. It wasn't a murmur. It was an explosion of noise. Guests jumped to their feet. My mother let out a scream that sounded like a wounded animal. Chantel took a step back, tripping over her massive train. "You are lying," she shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at me. "She is lying, Tyler. She is crazy. She is just jealous." I didn't have to answer. I simply turned around and gestured toward the back of the room. As if on cue, the heavy oak doors swung open. 4 officers in dark suits stepped into the floral wonderland. They were not smiling. They were walking straight down the aisle, and they were holding handcuffs. The wedding was officially over. The arraignment had begun. The heavy black shoes of the detectives thudded against the marble floor, a rhythm of doom that drowned out the soft gasps of the guests. They moved with a terrifying efficiency, ignoring the walls of white hydrangeas and the crying bride. They were not there for the scenery. They walked straight past Chantel, who was trembling at the altar, and stopped directly in front of the first pew. My father, Otis Carter, stood up. He puffed out his chest, trying to summon the same bullying authority he had used to control his household for 30 years. He adjusted his tuxedo lapels and glared at the lead detective. "Excuse me," he boomed his voice, shaking slightly. "This is a private religious ceremony. You are interrupting a union under God. Get out of here before I call your superiors. I know people in this city." The lead detective did not blink. He did not look impressed by the tuxedo or the venue. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Otis Carter," he said, his voice flat and loud. "You are under arrest for grand larceny, fraud in the first degree, and forgery of a legal deed." My mother let out a shrill scream, clutching my father's arm. "No!" she wailed, looking around the room with wild eyes. "This is a mistake! We are good people! We are church people! Tell them, Otis! Tell them this is a misunderstanding!" The detective turned his cold gaze toward her. "Wanda Carter, you are also under arrest for conspiracy to commit credit card fraud and identity theft. Please turn around and place your hands behind your back." The reality of the moment shattered the room. The polite society veneer cracked instantly. The guests who had been whispering about the flowers were now standing on their chairs, craning their necks to get a better view. And then the phones came out. It was a sea of black rectangles. The very same people Chantel had invited to witness her triumph were now live-streaming her destruction. I saw the flashes going off. I heard the digital chirps of recording buttons being pressed. The downfall of the Carter family was being broadcast in real time to the very internet audience my sister had cultivated. My father struggled briefly as an officer grabbed his wrist. "Get your hands off me," he shouted. "I am the father of the bride. You cannot do this to me." I watched as the officer spun him around. The metal handcuffs glinted under the crystal chandeliers. Click, click. The sound was sharp and mechanical. It cut through the hysteria like a knife. My father, the man who had terrified me with his shouting, the man who had signed my name to steal my house, was suddenly rendered powerless by 2 loops of steel. My mother went limp, sobbing uncontrollably as a female officer cuffed her wrists. She looked up, scanning the crowd, desperately searching for a savior. Her eyes landed on me. I was still standing in my red suit, calm and immovable. "Dominique!" she screamed, her voice cracking. "Do something! Tell them! Help your mother!" I did not move. I did not speak. I simply watched. For years they had relied on my guilt to save them. They had banked on my shame. But as I watched the police march them down the aisle, past the horrified faces of the Sterling family, I felt lighter than I had in a decade. The bank was closed, the bailout was denied, and the show was finally over. The chaos of the arrest had left a vacuum of silence in the ballroom. The music had stopped. The waiters were frozen with trays of champagne in their hands. The only sound was the weeping of my sister, who stood alone at the altar. She looked small. The grand illusion she had built was crumbling around her feet, and I was the only one left standing to sweep up the debris. I walked slowly up the marble steps to the pulpit, where the priest had been standing just moments ago. I did not rush. My red suit was a bright slash of color against the white flowers. I reached out and adjusted the microphone. It gave a high-pitched whine of feedback that made the guests wince, but it got their attention. Every eye was on me. I looked down at Chantel. Her mascara was running in black streaks down her face, ruining the makeup she hadn't paid for. She looked up at me with a mixture of hatred and terror. She knew I had the floor. She knew I had the truth. "Chantel!" I said, my voice amplified and echoing through the vast room. "You look beautiful. You truly do. You wanted to be a princess today. You wanted the fairy tale. And you almost got it." I paused, looking out at the sea of faces. I saw Tyler standing a few feet away, looking like a man who had just woken up from a coma. "But we need to be honest about the cost of this fairy tale," I continued. "That dress you are wearing, Chantel, the one with the imported French lace and the hand-stitched pearls, it is breathtaking. But it does not belong to you. It was purchased with a stolen credit card. It is evidence in a felony investigation. You are not wearing a wedding gown. You are wearing a crime scene." Chantel sobbed, her shoulders shaking. "Stop it, Dom," she whispered. "Please stop." I did not stop. I gestured to the room around us. The flowers, the crystal, the 5-course meal that is waiting in the kitchen. None of it is paid for. It was all funded by fraud. It was bought with money our parents stole from me and from lenders who break legs for a living. This entire event is a counterfeit bill that I finally refused to cash. I turned my gaze to Tyler. He was pale. He was looking at Chantel with horror, realizing that everything she had told him about our family was a lie. "And there is one last thing," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerously low register. "I know you and Mom are planning to host the post-wedding brunch at the house in Cascade Heights tomorrow. You wanted to show off the family estate to the Sterlings. You wanted to prove our legacy." I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a folded document. I held it up. "You cannot go back to that house, Chantel, because as of 8 o'clock this morning, it no longer belongs to us. I exercised my right as the sole owner and sold it. The new owners take possession in 48 hours. The locks are being changed as we speak." I let the paper fall from my hand. It fluttered down, landing on the train of her stolen dress. "You are homeless, Chantel. You have no venue. You have no money. You have no house. And judging by the look on your fiancé's face, you have no groom." I stepped back from the microphone. The silence was absolute. It was the silence of a total and complete execution. I had stripped her bare in front of the world. I walked down the steps past my sobbing sister and walked straight toward the exit. The click of my heels on the marble was the only sound in the room. I did not look back. There was nothing left to see. Tyler stood at the altar, looking down at the woman he had been ready to pledge his life to just 5 minutes ago. Chantel was on her knees amidst the folds of the stolen lace gown, reaching out for his hand with trembling fingers. Her mascara was smeared, and she looked up at him with desperate, pleading eyes, begging him to see the victim she was pretending to be. But Tyler did not see a victim. He saw a liability. He recoiled from her touch, as if her skin were coated in something toxic. The look on his face was not heartbreak. It was pure, unadulterated disgust. He looked at the empty spot where her parents had stood before being hauled away in handcuffs. He looked at me in my red suit. And then he looked back at Chantel with the cold detachment of a man realizing he had almost bought a counterfeit diamond. His mother, Mrs. Sterling, did not wait for him to process his feelings. She marched up the marble steps, her heels clicking with military precision. She gripped Tyler's arm firmly. Her face was a mask of icy fury. "Come along, Tyler," she commanded. "We are leaving this circus immediately." Tyler nodded. He straightened his tuxedo jacket, smoothing away the invisible stain of his association with us. He looked at Chantel one last time. There was no pity in his gray eyes, only the relief of a bullet dodged. "The engagement is canceled, effective immediately," Tyler said, his voice echoing in the silent ballroom. "The Sterling family does not harbor criminals. Do not contact me again." He turned on his heel. He did not look back. He walked down the aisle, flanked by his parents, stepping over the dropped bouquet of white orchids without breaking his stride. He walked out of the double doors, leaving Chantel sobbing alone on the floor, a rejected bride in a stolen dress, surrounded by the wreckage of a life she could not afford. The heavy thud of the doors closing behind the Sterlings was the final straw. Chantel did not just cry, she shattered. She let out a scream that sounded less like a human and more like a banshee. She collapsed onto the marble floor, her hands tearing at the expensive imported flowers, shredding the white orchids into a confetti of failure. Her face was a mask of black streaks where the mascara had run, mixing with the snot and tears. She looked up and saw me standing there, calm and untouched in my red suit. "You ruined my life!" she shrieked, scrambling to her feet. Her eyes were wild. She did not look like a sister anymore. She looked like a rabid animal. "I hate you, Dominique. I will kill you." She lunged at me, her fingers curled into claws, ready to tear the skin from my face. She wanted to hurt me physically, because she could no longer hurt me financially. She never reached me. 2 burly hotel security guards intercepted her midair. They grabbed her arms, dragging her back as she thrashed violently in the stolen gown. She kicked and screamed, her heels scraping uselessly against the floor, spitting curses at me. I did not flinch. I did not step back. I simply looked at her with a profound sense of pity. I reached up and brushed a speck of imaginary dust from the lapel of my jacket. I stepped over a crushed pile of white hydrangeas that lay at my feet, avoiding the mess completely. I walked down the long aisle past the empty chairs and the shocked guests. I pushed open the doors and walked out of the ballroom, leaving the screaming and the wreckage behind me. I did not look back. I had a life to live, and for the first time in 30 years, it was finally mine. The fluorescent lights of the 19th precinct were a harsh contrast to the soft glow of the chandeliers at the plaza. The air smelled of stale coffee bleach and desperate choices. I stood on the clean side of the reinforced glass partition looking into the holding cell. Inside sat the remnants of the Carter dynasty. My father, Otis, was sitting on a bolted metal bench, his tuxedo jacket torn at the shoulder and his bow tie hanging loose around his neck. My mother, Wanda, was pacing back and forth, her mother of the bride gown trailing across the dirty linoleum floor, collecting dust and grime. When they saw me walk in, their faces lit up. It was not a look of love. It was the look a drowning man gives a life raft. They did not see a daughter. They saw a bail bondsman. Dominique, thank God, Otis barked, rushing to the bars. Get your checkbook out. The judge set bail at $50,000. It is ridiculous. Hurry up and pay it so we can get out of this hellhole and sue the hotel for false imprisonment. Wanda pressed her face against the glass. Baby, I knew you would not abandon us, she cried. Tell them who we are. Tell them this is just a big misunderstanding. We are tired, Dominique. Take us home. I stood there in my red suit, silently observing them. They still did not get it. They truly believed that my role on this earth was to clean up their messes. They thought this was just another overdraft fee, another maxed-out credit card that I would quietly handle to keep the peace. I placed my hands on the cold metal counter. I did not reach for my wallet. I did not reach for my phone. I am not here to pay the bail, I said, my voice calm and final. I am here to say goodbye. The hope vanished from their eyes, replaced by shock. What are you talking about? My father growled. We are your parents. You owe us. I owe you nothing, I replied. I have paid for my life 10 times over. I bought the house you lived in. I bought the food you ate. I bought the clothes on your backs, and in return, you stole my identity and tried to destroy my name. I took a step back from the glass. You are going to stay in there, I continued. You are going to wait for the public defender. You are going to stand before a judge, and you are going to learn the one lesson you never taught me: accountability. I am done being your ATM. I am done being your retirement plan. As of this moment, I resign from the position of being your daughter. I turned around. My mother's screams echoed against the tile walls, begging me to come back. My father cursed my name, but I kept walking. I walked out of the station and into the cool night air, leaving them behind in the cage they had built for themselves. The eviction crew arrived at the house in Cascade Heights just as the morning fog was lifting. They were efficient and unsentimental, moving with the speed of men who had done this 1,000 times. I watched from my car parked across the street as the life my parents had built on my dime was dismantled piece by piece. The mahogany dining table where they had plotted against me was hauled out to the curb. The velvet sofas where they had sat and judged me were stacked precariously on the wet pavement. Seeing their prized possessions sitting on the concrete exposed to the elements made them look small and cheap. It was a visual representation of their legacy. I had one final act of charity left in me. I waved to the moving truck I had hired. I handed the driver a key and a slip of paper with an address. It was not a mansion. It was a cramped studio apartment on the gritty side of town with peeling paint and thin walls. I had paid the rent for exactly 30 days. It was not a gift. It was a severance package. I watched the truck load up their furniture and drive away, taking the toxicity out of my life forever. I rolled up my window and started my engine. The balance was finally 0. 6 months had passed since the catastrophe at the plaza. The internet moves fast, and the world had largely forgotten about the bride who was arrested at the altar. But the brands had not forgotten. Chantel was buried under a mountain of lawsuits for breach of contract, and the only influence she had left was over a mop bucket. I walked into a small coffee shop near my office, the kind where people grab a quick caffeine fix on their way to real jobs. I was wearing my new coat, looking at my phone, when I almost tripped over a yellow wet floor sign. I looked down. The woman on her knees, scrubbing a stubborn coffee stain, was not wearing designer silk. She was wearing a stained gray uniform. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and her nails, the ones she used to flaunt on Instagram, were short and chipped. Chantel looked up. For a moment, time stood still. The noise of the espresso machine faded away. She saw me, standing there in my success. I saw her kneeling in her consequence. Her eyes filled with tears. It was a look of desperate realization, a silent plea for the sister she had thrown away. She wanted me to save her. She wanted me to fix it one last time. I looked at her and felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no pity, just the cool indifference of a stranger passing someone on the street. I stepped around the wet spot she was cleaning and walked out the door, leaving her to scrub up her own mess. The autumn breeze along the Seine was crisp, but for the first time in years, I did not feel the cold. I sat at a small round table outside a cafe in Le Marais, watching the Parisians walk by with their effortless grace. There was no screaming. There were no urgent text messages demanding cash. There was no manufactured drama. For a long time, I was terrified of this moment. My mother had always told me that without family, I would be nothing. She told me that I would be lonely and miserable in my big, empty house. She used my fear of isolation to keep me shackled to her chaos. But as I broke a piece of a fresh croissant, I realized she was lying about that too. This was not loneliness. This was solitude. And it was the most expensive luxury I had ever purchased. I looked at the empty chair across from me, and I did not feel a void. I felt space. Space to breathe. Space to dream. Space to finally be the protagonist of my own life. I took a sip of my cappuccino and smiled at the river. I had lost a family, but I had found myself. And that was a trade I would make again in a heartbeat. I used to believe that blood was the strongest contract in the world. I thought it was a bond that could not be broken no matter how much abuse you poured onto it. I thought that being a good daughter meant setting yourself on fire just to keep your parents warm. I thought that being a good sister meant letting your siblings stand on your shoulders even if they were wearing cleats. But sitting here today, watching the sunset paint the sky over Paris in shades of gold and violet, I realize how wrong I was. We are taught from the moment we are born that family is unconditional. We are told that you have to forgive them because they are your kin. But that is a lie. Relationships are a two-way street. If love only flows one way, it is not a relationship. It is a robbery. For 30 years, I paid a tax just to exist in my own home. I bought affection, I rented respect, and the moment the money ran out, I saw exactly what I was paying for. Nothing. I was paying for the privilege of being used. People ask me if I miss them. They ask if I feel a phantom limb where my family used to be. And I tell them the truth. I do not miss the anxiety. I do not miss the manipulation. I do not miss the constant feeling of walking on eggshells in my own kitchen, wondering which version of my father would walk through the door, or what lie my sister would tell next. I have learned a hard and necessary lesson. DNA is just biology. It is a random roll of the genetic dice. It makes you related, but it does not make you family. Family is not about whose blood runs in your veins. It is about who would bleed for you. It is about the people who cheer for you when you win and hold you up when you fall, not the ones who try to pick your pockets while you are down. Family are the people who respect your boundaries. They are the ones who bring you soup when you are sick without asking for a loan afterwards. They are the ones who love you for your soul, not your salary. I have friends now who buy me dinner just because they want to spend time with me. I have mentors who guide me without expecting a kickback. I have a life that is quiet and boring and absolutely wonderful. I have replaced the chaos with peace. I have replaced the drama with stability. And I have replaced the obligation with choice. I reached out and picked up the glass of vintage Bordeaux sitting on the table. The deep red liquid swirled in the glass, catching the last light of the day. It reminded me of the suit I wore the day I took my life back. The day I stopped being a victim and started being the author of my own story. The day I realized that the most expensive thing I could ever own was my own dignity. To the ones we lose along the way, I whispered to the empty air, and to the peace we find when we finally let them go. I brought the glass to my lips. The wine was rich and complex, but the aftertaste was sweet. It tasted like freedom. I smiled at the horizon, ready for whatever comes next. Because, for the first time in my life, I am not paying for the view. I own it. Dominique's story teaches a brutal but necessary truth. Shared DNA is not a license for abuse. For years, she mistook financial exploitation for familial duty, only to realize that true love is never transactional. The moment she stopped paying for their affection, she exposed the reality that she was seen as a resource, not a daughter. This narrative is a powerful reminder that no is a complete sentence. You cannot buy respect, and you should never bankrupt your spirit to fund someone else's delusion. Real peace is not found in compliance. It is found in the courage to walk away from those who only love you when you are useful. Stop setting yourself on fire to keep ungrateful people warm. Invest in your peace today, because your dignity is the only asset that is truly non-negotiable.